think that Josh would be silly not to be looking at the new boundaries and not be reconsidering his decision last year not to recontest. I think that Kooyong is almost a certain pickup for the Liberal Party now.
This is a tale about electoral mathematics and party politics. The Australian Electoral Commission threw big rocks in the political pool on Friday with its proposed changes to electoral boundaries. The boundaries are changed to reflect shifting populations. In this case, the net result would be the loss of one seat in Victoria and the gaining of one seat in Western Australia. Former MP Jason Falinski, who lost his Northern Sydney seat of Mackellar at the 2022 election, is a link into the broader story of both electoral mathematics and party politics, despite the fact he is from New South Wales. It was his comments speculating on whether former Treasurer Josh Frydenberg might run for his old seat of Kooyong that meant a lot of the focus has been on that decision over the weekend. But it is more complicated than that.
So Victoria's lost one seat and Western Australia's gained one seat. In Victoria, the seat that was lost is the seat of Higgins. And in Western Australia, they've added a seat called Bullwinkle.
Higgins was once regarded as a blue ribbon Liberal seat. It was the seat of Peter Costello and of former Prime Ministers Harold Holt and Sir John Gorton. Michelle Anand-Raya won it for Labor in 2022. The former Liberal member, Katie Allen, has been pre-selected to try to win it back. So that's two women without a seat to contest. But the redistribution creates ripples way beyond the abolition of one seat and the creation of another one. Boundaries are proposed to change in many electorates in Victoria and Western Australia.
Kooyong is one of the seats that was redrawn significantly, and that has meant that there's actually about almost a quarter of the voters in that seat are new to the electorate. Bullwinkle hasn't flipped any other seats from one side to the other. Andrew Hastie's electorate of Canning has become a little bit more marginal, and it's also had some knock-on effects on the northern side where kind of every seat has shrunk a little bit. So seats like Cowan and Perth that are held by the Labor Party have shifted a little bit.
But back in Victoria, the focus for the last 3 days has been on Kooyong and Josh Frydenberg.
I think that there might be some, Josh Frydenberg fans that got a little bit of a rush of blood to the head when they saw these boundary changes. But, quite frankly, our focus as a party should be on keeping Higgins right now.
Josh Frydenberg is an immense talent for the Victorian division. Whatever his future is in politics, who knows? But I think people are getting ahead of themselves here.
Even though Frydenberg has now said he won't run, the response to speculation that he would has been revealing. Many people have had opinions about it, particularly since the Victorian Party have already pre-selected candidates. In Kooyong, that's a well-qualified woman, Amelia Hamer. So the Frydenberg speculation raised the Liberals' women's question. Hilmer's Network is an organisation set up to encourage Liberal-minded women into politics, and they certainly had a view.
Josh Frydenberg, he could have challenged Scott Morrison ahead of the last election. He could have put his hand up for the Kooyong pre-selection. He didn't. He could have run for the Victorian vacancy for the Senate. He didn't. Women are not collateral damage for Josh Frydenberg's regrets, and they shouldn't be treated as such.
Jason Falinski had seemed to channel the view that Hamer should stand aside for a bloke.
I think that Amelia is a team player and she would understand that we want to put our best people on the field, and there are other seats, especially in state parliament, that need to be filled.
I don't think the people of Kooyong are particularly interested in the internal politics of the Liberal Party. And you know what? I'm not interested in it either.
The focus on possible new pre-selections in Victoria overlook a couple of more fundamental issues. The first being that the Liberal Party has been recording woefully low primary votes in Victoria for some time.
The Liberal Party in Victoria doesn't get the same kind of vote it used to do. Even the seats they now hold in Victoria are held by very slim margins.
Another crucial issue is that Kooyong has become a so-called teal seat, won by Dr Monique Ryan in 2022 after a swing of almost 7% against Frydenberg. She achieved that after harnessing a massive community-based organisation of supporters. Over this last weekend, Ryan and her band of supporters were once again out door-knocking across Kooyong. She posted on X that she was able to get 80 supporters out on the streets, and there isn't even an election campaign on. Many observers have already spoken of how opposition leader Peter Dutton's political strategy has not embraced aggressively trying to win those seats back. But the Teals had their own problems elsewhere in the country, particularly in northern Sydney, where 3 Teal seats sit next to each other.
On the North Shore, you've got Mackellar on the northern beaches, you've got Warringah around Manly, and then you've got North Sydney around North Sydney. And those three MPs there, they're quite aligned with each other, but they've been proposing contradictory things in their submissions to the redistribution. And I think what we will see is that some of those MPs will need to take on territory that previously belonged to one of their colleagues. I suspect that Kylie Tink in North Sydney is likely to have to take on areas that are currently part of a non-independent electorate, probably Bradfield, could potentially set her up for a contest against Paul Fletcher, who holds the next neighbouring seat of Bradfield.
This is where Jason Falinski comes directly into the story. His intervention about Frydenberg did not go unnoticed in New South Wales. That's because proposed redistributions in New South Wales are due to be released very soon, possibly as early as the end of this week. His comments were seen within the party as potentially reflecting his own intention to have another run at Parliament, further complicating a possible scramble for redistributed seats. Though Falinski has said he won't be seeking pre-selection. And there are also issues of possible change in Western Sydney.
New South Wales is going to lose an electorate. It looks pretty likely that at some point in the northern suburbs a seat will get abolished. It's also possible they might actually abolish 2 seats in the eastern half of Sydney, one north of the harbour and one south of the harbour, and then create a new seat in the western suburbs, kind of, somewhere between Penrith and Campbelltown, that would take in all that extra population growth we're seeing in the western suburbs.
One fascinating potential redistribution in New South Wales concerns the seat of Grayndler, held by MP and Prime Minister Anthony Albanese.
There's this kind of knock-on effect you get as you move from the eastern suburbs to the west, and that adds up over time. But there's a question about whether the Commission would actually be willing to do that, even if that is the most logical decision, to abolish that seat name.
That would be a particularly interesting call by the Electoral Commissioner.